Alrighty, just give me one more sec here. That is way too many tabs. I'm gonna have problems. Well, evidently not today. Well, that's good. Okay, here we go. Welcome. Oh, I am demuted already. Welcome back to Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggith, and this week we got more heavy time. We're doing some heavy time by CJ Cherryh. So previously on, Ben Pollard and Larry Bird? I think it's Larry Bird. Maury Bird. I was close. I was off by a letter or two. Ben Pollard and Maury Bird uh, were towing Dekker's ship with their own out of the belt. Well, they're still technically at the asteroid belt, but to the station. Number 2, station 2, refinery 2. I'm sorry. I'm having to get caught up because I've both been reading other stuff and doing a lot of things. The Trinidad is Ben and Bird's ship. I don't remember the name of Dekker's ship offhand. So they've brought it in after answering the distress call and finding Dekker aboard and no other partner. And now they have been confronted by station security, I believe. Uh, yes, Officer Wills of Security. Understand you found a drifter. And unfortunately, I can't remember what voice I used for him. And I didn't take the time to listen, so we're going to be faking it. So my apologies. This is what happens. This is what happens when you do this live and you can't remember. And you don't do it all in one sitting either, which incidentally would shred my throat. We've got about 40 something pages we're going to get through this week. I started a bit later than I would have liked to, but name's the breaks. All right, give me one sec to water up, and we'll get cracking. Chapter 5. You have any theories to explain what happened? Wills asked. The cops hung face to face with him, all of them maintaining position with holds on the safety lines, and you about needed the earpiece to hear at the moment over the thundering racket from a series of loads going down the spinning core. Bird, mindful of the optex Wills was wearing, shrugged, shook his head, and said, mostly honestly, "Could have caught a rock. Hell of a bash on one side. On the other hand, the bash could have been secondary. Maybe he was working real close in and just didn't see another one coming. Dunno, really. Dunno if it's going to be easy to tell. We didn't go outside, just got a look on vid. We did make a tape. We'll want that. Also your log. Did you remove anything from the wreck?" We took out the rescuee and the clothes he was wearing. Nothing else. We washed 'em and he's still wearing 'em. He had his watch and nothing in his pockets. He's still wearing the watch. Everything else we left aboard, even his clothes and his personals. You wouldn't want to open up without a decom squad. It's a real mess in that ship. Any idea where the partner is? Evidently, she was outside when the accident happened. He kept trying to call her, kept trying when he was off his head. I guess he tried till he couldn't think of anything else. They're from R1. Her name was Corey. That's all we ever figured out. His life systems were near gone. Ship was tumbling pretty bad. He'd taken a lot of knocks. He hoped to hell that would cover Ben's ass about the bruises. He felt dirty doing it, but he would have felt dirtier not to. Kid was pretty sick from breathing all that stuff. Kept hallucinating about having to call his partner. Evidently did everything he could to find us, sick as he was. He tried to put Dekker in the best light he could, too. Fair being fair. When we got to him, I guess he finally realized she was gone. Fever set in. He's been off his head a lot, just keeps asking over and over for his partner, that's all. What would he say? Just her name. Sometimes he'd yell, "Look out!" like he was warning someone. Kid's exhausted. Like when you give up and then the adrenaline runs out. Yeah, Will said. Didn't happen to say why they were out of their zone? He didn't know they were out of their zone. So he did say something else. We had to explain we were taking him to R2. It upset him. He was lost, disoriented. The accident must have happened the other side of the line. Cops never told you a thing. Wills grunted, monkeyed along the lines toward the hatch as if he was going inside. The other officers followed. But one of the blue-suited meds was outbound, towing a stretcher with Dekker aboard, and the other meds were close behind. The cops stopped them at the lines just outside the hatch, delayed to look Dekker over, talk to the meds, evidently ask Dekker something. There was a lot of machinery noise on the dock. They must be loading or offloading, and he couldn't hear what they said or what Dekker answered. They only let the meds take him away, and that course came past him. They had they had wrapped Dekker up in blankets, had him strapped into the stretcher, and Dekker looked wasted and sick as hell. But his eyes were open, looking around. The meds brought the stretcher to a drifting stop and said, "You want to say goodbye?" It was one of those faces that could haunt a man, Dekker's lost, distracted expression. But Dekker seemed to track on him then. "Bird," he said faintly through the noise and the banging overhead. "Where are they taking me?" Dekker looked scared. Bird wanted it over with, wanted to forget Dekker and Dekker's nightmares and the stink and the cold of that ship, not even caring right now if they got anything for their trouble but their refit paid. He sure didn't want an ongoing attachment. But that question latched onto him, and he found himself reaching out and putting a hand against Dekker's shoulder. "Hospital, that's all, son. You're on R2, Doc. You'll be all right." Bird looked at the meds, then gave a shrug, wanting them to go, now, before Dekker got himself worked up to a scene. They started away. "Bird?" Dekker said as they went, and called out louder, a voice that cut right to the nerves, even over the racket. "Bird?" He exhaled a shaky breath and shook his head, wanting a go at the bar real bad right now. Ben came out of the hatch with their personal kits. The police stopped him, and insisting on taking the kits one by one and turning them this way and that. They were asking Ben questions when he drifted up, and Ben was saying, in answer to those questions, "The guy was off his head. Didn't know what he'd do next. Screaming out all the time. Thinking it was his ship he was on. We had to worry he'd go after controls or something." He scowled a warning at Ben, but not a plain one. There was the optex Wills was making of every twitch they made. Ben was looking only at the officers. He said, to explain the scowl, "You'd be off your head too if you'd been banged around like that." "In the accident," Wills said, fishing. "Ship tumbling like that," he said. "The wonder is he lived through it. Couldn't have helped his partner. All he'd looked to have left was his emergency beeper, and when that tank blew, it didn't go straight. You got this center of mass here, see? And you get this tank back here." You got too technical, and the docksiders wanted another topic in a hurry. Wills said, interrupting him, Go into that with the court of inquiry. We'll want to log those kits. Leave them with us and we'll send them to your residence. What's your ID?" "On the tag there." Ben indicated his kit. 1347-283-689 is mine. Bird here's 688-687-257. Ship's open. Look all you like." "You can go now." You never got thanks out of a company cop, either. Bird scowled, looked at Ben, and the two of them handed their way up lines toward the hand line. A beep meant a boom was moving. Red lights stained the walls. But the alarm was from the other end of the big conduit. and chute-centered oh, I see. The big conduit and chute-centered tunnel that was the cargo mast. You could get dizzy if you looked at the core itself, if you just let yourself, whoops, if you let yourself just for a moment think about up and down or where you were. Bird focused on the inbound gripper handle coming toward him, ignored the moving surface on the backfield of his vision, caught it, and felt the first all-over stretch he'd had in months as it hauled him along. Ben had caught the one immediately behind him. He looked back to see. Customs, he remarked to Customs, he remarked to Ben in a lull in the racket from the chutes. I hope they've talked to the cops. No trouble. We haven't even got our personals. Cops have got 'em. Cops have got everything. They gave me this receipt, see? He used his free hand to tap his pocket. Hell, we're just little guys. What are we gonna have? We'll get a wave through. You watch. They'll give us hell. So don't tell 'em it was out zone. We reported it where the rules say. We got rights. Meanwhile, we're gone into a public contact area and there's no use for them to check us, is there? Rights, he muttered. We got whatever rights Mama decides to give us is what we got. What did you tell that cop about Dekker? Did you tell him he was crazy? Hey, they don't need my help to figure that. The meds belted him in good and tight when they took him away. What did you tell them? I said he wasn't too clear where he was. They asked about the bruises, and I said he got loose, all right. He was after the controls, and he's crazy, besides which he fought us when we had to get him back and forth to the head. That's a couple of times, Ben, for God's sake. Hey, we got this guy tied to the plumbing, bruises all over him, all ages. What are we going to say? It was a month-long party out there? Yeah, he said, and shut up, because the chute was sucking another load down, and down here you could hear the hydraulics. His stomach was upset. It had been upset for the last week, when it had been clearer and clearer Dekker was not going to be able to support a thing they said, that Dekker was liable to say anything, or claim they'd met ETs and seen God. This is it, Ben had said when Dekker had tried to get at the engine fire controls. They'd put Dekker to bed, taped hand and foot. Dekker had screamed for an hour afterward, and Ben had gotten that on tape, too. He had wanted to erase the video. He had wanted to erase that video. Dekker had enough troubles without that on permanent record with the company. Dekker could lose his license, lose his ship, lose everything he had, and he didn't want to hand BM the evidence that set it up that way. But Ben had said it. Dekker wasn't any saner than he had been. Dekker would have been dead in a few days if they hadn't found him, and as much as they'd done to patch the kid together, he didn't seem likely to need much of anything but a ticket back to the Motherwell and a long, long time in rehab. Poor sod, he said. Ben said, Good riddance. And when he frowned at him, Hell, Bird, I've seen skitsy behavior before. I've seen damn well enough of it. There was profound bitterness behind that. He had no idea why or what Ben was talking about, but Ben didn't volunteer anything else. Ben was talking about the school, he decided, or the dorms where Ben had spent what other people called childhood. It didn't matter now. The trip was over. Dekker was with the meds, the whole business was out of their hands, and Ben knew Shakespeare wasn't a physicist. Good for him. They, They'd patch up their partnership and take their heavy time while somebody else leased Trinidad out and paid them 15 and 20 plus repairs and refit. Could do that all the time if they wanted, but you didn't get rich on 15 and 20 while you were sitting on dockside spending most of it. Got to give up sleeping and eating. He was accustomed to joke about it. Ben would say, intense as he always was when you talked about money, we got to get us a break, is what. They got off the line in customs. Explained they didn't have their personals. The cops had them. No, they didn't have any ore in their pockets, and they didn't have any illegal mag media on them. All the records were on that ship. Yes, they had contacted another ship out there. They'd hauled a guy in. They hadn't taken anything off it. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. They'd tell medical if they got any rashes or developed any fevers and coughs. Medical had already told them that. Yes, sir. God, no, they didn't volunteer to customs that it was an outzone ship. Yes, sir, they'd reported the contact. No, it was an instructed contact. The agent's questions were strictly routine, and the stress detectors didn't beep once. Customs validated their data cards, logged them both as active in R2, and they went back to the hand line for the lifts. Ben said, conversationally, while they were each trailing by a gripper handle, Ben in front this time, "You can quit worrying about the charts. Got the card in my pocket." His heart went thump. "Damn it, Ben! Hell, it was all right. I told you to leave it. Where the cops could find it? You could have said, God. Hey, you're a lousy liar. Was I going to burden your conscience? You passed the detectors. So did I, right?" Ben could. Stress detectors depended on a conscience. "You're just too damn whoops. You're just too damn nervous, Bird. You could have left him under that plate, damn it. You could have done what I told you to do. You want to get caught, that's the way you do it. Conceal something on the cops. I didn't conceal it. It was right in my pocket. God, Bird, everybody does it. If they wanted to clamp down, why do they let us have game cards? Or vid? Why don't they check that? I could code the whole thing onto a vid tape. If too many people get too cocky, just watch them. Some nosy exec gets a notion, and you can walk right into it, Ben. You can't talk your way out of everything. Everything so far. Hell, he muttered. They were coming to the end of the hand line, where you got 3 easy chances to grab a bar and dismount in good order instead of, embarrassment, shooting on down to the buffer sacks that forcibly disengaged a passenger before the line took the turn. Ben was first on the bar, swung over and pushed 8 deck on the lift panel before he caught up. "I'll ride down with you." "So where else are you going?" "Where do you think?" "Shit, Ben." "Somebody will. Probably there's a line of creditors on the ship. But we'll at least get the 50-50. Damn right we will." "You're bucking for back trouble, and you won't get a damn thing. There'll be a rule." "Young bones. I won't stay long. And there's no real choice, Bird. You have to file the day you get in. That's the rule." "So file at the Corps office." "Trust those bastards? No do. Corp Deck's it." "Out of your mind," he muttered as the car arrived. They floated in, took a handhold. The car sealed, clanked and made its noisy, jerky interface with the rotating heart of the core, and started solidly off down the link. He didn't argue any more with Ben. If Ben had the fortitude to go down a level past Hell Deck an hour after dock and stand in some line to file to claim the poor sod's ship, he didn't know what to do with him. He only sighed and stared glumly at the doors and the red-lit bar that showed them approaching another take-hold. "Bird, you got to take better care of yourself. What have you got for your old age?" "I'm in it, and I don't plan to survive it." The car clanked into the spoke, and they shot into it with the illusion of climbing until they hit that queasy couple of seconds where the distance from R2's spin axis equaled out the car's momentum as far as the inner ear was concerned. Then the ear figured out where down was. The car's rolling floor found it a half heartbeat later, and the bones and muscles started realizing that the stim suits you worked in, the spin cylinders you slept in, and the pills you took like candy didn't entirely make up for weeks of weightlessness. Knees would feel it. Backs would. The red lit bar that showed their distance from the core was shooting toward 8 deck. Meg and Sal were on 6. He had found that out on their way in. He'd left a message for them on the board, and he planned on company tonight. That and a drink and a long, long bath. Maybe with Meg, if she answered her messages. If she wasn't otherwise engaged. Oh, one sec. swore I had that turned off. There we are. The car stopped. He got out, on legs that felt tired even under 8's low G, muscles weary of fighting the stim suit's elastic, and now with G to complicate matters. Ben got out too, and said, "Meet you at the bow." Is that bow or bow? I'm going to go with bow. I'll find out. Ben didn't even slow down. He just punched the button to go down as far as the core lift went, to 3. Bird shook his head and headed off down 8 deck. It is bow. Sorry. Meet you at the bow. Bird shook his head and headed off down 8 deck. Damned if he was going to call up his mail before he hit the bar at the Starbow. Mail would consist of a bank statement and a few notes from friends as to when they'd gone out and when they'd be back. His brother in Colorado wrote twice a year, postal rates out here being a week's groceries and Sam not being rich. It wasn't quite time for the biannual letter, and outside of that there just wasn't mail there outside of that there wasn't mail to get excited about. So screw that. He just wanted a chance to get the weight off, get a drink, see a couple of familiar female faces, if fate was kind, and never mind Ben's wet dreams. Ships didn't come without debts, probably multiple owners, not mentioning the bank, and the company would find some technicality to chew up any proceeds they could possibly make from the ship, till it was hardly worth the price of a good rock, plus expenses. Ben was going to work himself into a heart attack someday. If ulcers didn't get him first. The meds said, and the Institute taught you, some null G effects got worse every time you went out. Your bones resorbed, your kidneys picked up the calcium and made stones, and the body learned the response, snapped to it faster with practice, as it were, and Ben believed it. Science devised ways to trick gravity evolved human systems, and you took your hormones, you spent your sleep time in the spinner, and you wore the damned stim suit like a religion. Most of all, you hoped you had good genes. They told gruesome tales of this old miner whose bones had all crumbled, and there was a guy down tending bar in Hell Deck who had so many plastic and metal parts he was always triggering the cops' weapons scans. He didn't intend to end up like that. No, sir. He intended eventually to be sitting in a nice leasing office collecting 15 and 20 on 2 ships, free and clear of debt, and letting other poor sods get their parts replaced. He had no objection to Maury Bird sitting in that office as vice president in charge of leases, for that matter. Bird had the people sense that could make it work, and Bird couldn't last at mining forever. They'd already replaced both hips. So Bird went off to the easy adjustment of 8 deck, in blind trust that Mama would do the right thing and assay their take in the sling and record all the data they'd shot to the offices during their approach, while the one of them who'd worked for Mama for 2 years and knew the way Mama worked took the immediate trip down to 3 deck and the frontage of the debtors' barracks he'd once lived in. Oddity was endemic hereabouts. You could look down the strip now and spot a guy dressed head to foot in purple, but he wasn't necessarily crazy. At least you could lay money he didn't claim the company'd done this or that or ask you the time every 5 minutes. God, he hated remembering this place. But he still kept an ultra cheap locker there with a change of clothes. Because you had to dress if you were going to call in debts. Nothing rad or rab, just classic. Good sweater, good pants, casual coat, real shoes. You had to look like solid credit to get what he was after. And his legs were in good enough shape, all things considered. He'd foreseen this, and taken his pills and worked out all the way back, burning off the desire to strangle Dekker, Bird had probably thought, regarding those unusually long sessions on the cycle and the bounce pads. But he could walk, at least. He could peel out of the coveralls and the stim suit, shower in the public gym, dress himself in stationer style, and go down past Hell Deck to one, where he weighed Earth normal, walking like an old man, it might be, but he'd taken a painkiller while they were coming in, and it was just a matter of taking it easy. Going where Mama knew damned well a spacer directly back from a run wasn't comfortable going, which was why so many tricky little company rules said you had to sign the forms in person, on the day you docked, at the core office, if you wanted Mama to take her time, or in the main offices, if you wanted expedition. The inner decks being notoriously short of lawyers, a lot of spacers never even realized expedition was possible. You could put in a company-backed claim on salvage, for instance, go to the general office, file to have the company run procedures, and wait it out, but that threw it into Aztec's administrative procedures, which ground exceedingly slow, and put it in the hands of Aztec's legal affairs, which usually found some T uncrossed or I undotted. Up there, you could file a claim for expenses, but you only got that after Mama had adjudicated the property claims, unless you knew to file hardship along with it. And you could file for salvage, but you had to know the right words and be sure the clerk you got used them. Half the low-level help at the Corps couldn't spell, let alone help you with legalese. Best of all, you could pay a call on an old classmate from the Institute, break the queue, and get the precise by-the-book words on the application. Eight Deck was transient and gray and lonely. You might see a handful of miners in from their runs, not to mention the beam crews and the construction jocks and whoever else worked long stints in Null. You saw the occasional shepherds and driver crews transiting out to their own fancy facilities, and a noisy lot of refinery tenders and warehouse and factory workers and dock monkeys on rest break. There were a lot of refinery operations on 8. And sometimes, these days, some of the military in on leave, but you didn't get anything like the flashy shops or the service you had down on Hell Deck. Here you kind of bounced along between floating and walking, being careful how fast you got going, being careful of walls and such. Your brittle bones and your diminished muscles and your head all needed to renew acquaintances with up and down, slowly if you were smart. The public part of 8 was all automats, even the sleeperies. No enterprising station free shop types behind the counters, even for the minim shifts that health and rehab would let a stationer work on 8. It was robot territory. Just stick your card in a slot and you got a sleepery room or a sandwich or the swill that passed here for bourbon whiskey. But that was all right for a start. Everything was cheaper than Hell Deck, and your whole sense of taste was off anyway, for the first bit you got used to refinery air. You found no luxury here that didn't come out of an automatic dispenser, unless you were working for the company. In which case, you saw a whole other class of accommodations, the adverts said. They said a whole lot better came out of the vending machines behind those doors. But Bird had never seen it. Driver crew and shepherds didn't need the way stops that miners did. If they were up here, they were slumming it, on a 1 hour down from some business in the mast. But generally, they went straight to Hell Deck, where big ship officers and tech crew had cushy little clubs and free booze and access with all sorts of perks on the company computers. Adverts said you could get at least a sniff of those perks, even as a miner, if you let the company own your ship and provide your basics. But that meant the company could also decide when you were too old or you didn't fit some profile, and then you were out. Goodbye and good luck, while some green fool got your ship. God help you, too, if Mama decided you weren't prime crew on that ship, and some company assigned prime crew got shunted out to work tender duty for 3 years at a driver's site, which effectively dumped all the relief crews back at the refinery onto the no perks basis to do timeshare in a plastics factory. Work for the company, and you could fill in your time swabbing tanks in the chemical division till you got old. till you got too old, and then they set you down on retirement perks and let you sweep floors in some company plant to earn your extras. Hell no. Not this old miner. But a lot of years he had been coming back to 8, and he'd seen changes. Or maybe he had felt livelier once upon a time. 8 these days echoed to footsteps, not to music and voices. The bright posters had all gone years ago, the month the company had gone over to paperless records keeping. The company favored gray paint or institution green, except for pipes that came wrapped with hazard yellow and black. You used to get the unofficial bills here, too, the pay stubs that would appear overnight, saying things like Towny Lies and Free Pratt and Marks. Mama hadn't liked those in the best days. No, sir. The bills said things like Equal Access and the Take One flyers that used to give you the news the company wouldn't. They'd all gone. No paper. You still found the old barred circle, you still found peace and free emigration scratched in restroom plastic, right alongside the stuff you could figure Neanderthals must have carved in the Stone Age bathrooms. You found Minim and Rabrad and Screw the Corp, along with other helpful suggestions in the toilets. Far more frequent here than down on Helldeck, he guessed, because standing Far more frequent here than down on Helldeck. He guessed because sanding down the panels in light G made a bitch of a lot of dust, and spray paint was as bad. Or maybe it was because security didn't come up here much, and the ordinary maintenance crews were contributing to it too. So the crud and the slogans stayed in the bathrooms, not even covered by paint, while 8 Deck got nastier and dirtier and showed its age like some miners he knew. He was in a sour mood. Maybe the cops, maybe Ben's stupid chance taking with the data card, maybe just that he was tired of the shit and tired of feeding a company that was trying to blow itself to hell. And right now, specifically, because the cops had their personals, which meant he was stuck in the stim suit and his day old coveralls until the cops turned his kit loose. Damned if he was going to buy new knee and ankle wraps at vending machine prices. But he did buy a bottle of aspirin, a cheap men's personals pack, and a far too expensive bottle of cologne. The hips were gone, the ankles were going, the hair was gray and thinning, but the essentials still worked, and he did have hopes. He walked into the bar in the front of the ambitiously named Starbow Hotel and, with his card in the slot at the desk, punched double and guests permitted. In the midst of which transaction, somebody grabbed him from behind and swung him around, clean off his feet. "Hey!" he yelled, as the turn brought him face to face with dusky-skinned Sal Abujib, who grabbed him the same as the one behind. That had to be Meg Cady. He hugged Sal back in this bouncing, unstable Minim G dance. He said, "Damn, you're both fools." But he'd hoped with all his heart they'd got his message. "Old friend of Mercy Hager's," Ben said at the counter, down in records. "Is she in?" The clerk looked over his shoulder, looked at him, looked at the line that stretched out the door, said uncertainly, "She might be." "Thanks," he said warmly, smiled, and on an adrenaline rush and a dogged determination not to show the pain, walked cheerfully past the counter, through clerk territory and on back to the hallway. Men in good suits didn't stand in that line. Ben Pollard didn't. He walked as far as an office that said M. Hager, Technical Supervisor, wiped the sweat off his face, rapped on the door, opened it, and leaned in the doorway. "Hello there, beautiful." Marcy Hager looked up from the desk, looked nonplussed for an instant. Then, "Ben Pollard! God, I thought you'd shipped out to Mars or something. Mind if I sit? She said, after a second's consideration. Of course not. Come on in. Coffee? Are you all right? You're white. First day back. Came down from 8. You're looking good. Last time I saw you, you were in assay. Marcy got up, poured 2 instant coffees. White? Sugar? Back from where? White. Plain. Assay for a while. Then I bought into his ship. Marcy's brows went up. Estimation of his finance clearly did. So did her interest. Social call? He grinned, sat down with the coffee, said, after a deliberately slow sip, I ran into a piece of luck. I thought you might be able to help me. You went to the company school. You learned what bought what from whom. Some were cheap, and some cost more than a free runner could possibly pay, but you always kept track of your old classmates, and, on call, you did favors, such as Marcy Hager was about to. Because favors got you favors, and that, for one thing, meant he didn't have to stand in that line. Yeah, Marcy said, and sat down and sipped her own coffee. Sounds interesting. Meaning Marcy thought somebody with a ship equity 4 years out of school just might be going somewhere, even a technical super in records might find useful. Even if free running was as high risk an investment as there was, it was disposable cash and high interest returns in the short term. And it was capital that a technical super in records, with all her access perks, couldn't lay hands on. But not as if Marcy was going to ask cold cash for favors. In Marcy's position, subject to company scrutiny, you never left a data trail. Just a little expediting. A claim for salvage. I don't want to be at the bottom of the list of creditors. This guy owes us. Big. Marcy's left eyebrow tilted. Like in major salvage. Ship salvage. He leaned back, eased a very sore set of muscles in his back, took another slow sip of coffee. Numbers 1 84 Zebra. Not from this zone, Benji. That's a long procedures delay. Where in hell have you been? Yeah, well, but... He turned on his nicest smile. Rule 1. You didn't deal in plain words. Rule 2. You were careful about cash. Rule 3. You didn't ask favors of prigs. But Marcy certainly wasn't that. Marcy said, Just so you know, and turned on her terminal. Marcy's kind might not trade in cash, but Marcy said, while she was idly tapping her way through a chain of accesses, Whatever happened to Angie Wyndham, you know? Don't know. But you know Theo Pangoulis went bust? He bet everything he had on that shop. Could have told him nothing succeeds in that location. Marcy scowled. That wasn't the kind of offering you gave. They were seriously negotiating now, and her fingers stopped moving. He said, On the other hand, I do hear from Harmon Phillips. Do you? You know he's on A.B. Torrey's staff, up in personnel. That's interesting, Marcy said. Have you got your numbers ready? It was swill, but there was G enough to keep it in the glass and you in your seat if you sat easy, and there was sure as hell good company. The 2 prettiest sights in the belt, Bird swore. Sohila Abujib, a grin gleaming on her dark face, her ears and fingers aglitter with her reserve bank account, laughed, elbowed Meg in the ribs, and said, He's been out there too long. Let me tell you, he said, and did, in the light traffic of the Starbows Auto Bar. They were in a crowd of dockers and tender and pusher jocks. The piped music adjusted itself up, affording a little privacy to people at the back corner table. Yow, Meg said when she had the essentials. So Ben's down an admin, is he? If he didn't break a leg, he said. I tell you, I'm worried about him. He's been acting like a crazy man from the time we linked with that ship. I don't know. Meg was what Meg was what bleh. Meg was what the young folk called rab, and the hairdo this time was what his generation called amazing, shaved bare up the sides, red as a fire atop, a mass of curls trailing down her neck, and all these bangles on her ears. With Meg, you'd never know what you'd see. Sometimes it was braids, and sometimes that hair turned colors. Meg Cady, she was, Hungarian on one side, Seoul Station Irish on the other, Meg said. But sometimes it was Scots, and once, overheard in a bar, she said it was Portuguese Martian. God only knew about Sal Abujib, who had a coffee complexion and coffee black eyes. With Sal, it was braids today, 100 of them, with metal clips. But you never knew. Sometimes that hair changed styles and colors too. Either one of them was too pretty for a gray-haired, brittle-boned old wreck. Had to be his brains they were after picking, he was sure. Get him drunk and ask him questions, buy a dinner and try to get specific coordinates out of glum, close-to-the-chest Ben, neither one of which had ever been too successful. But you never figured what made friends. You just took up with people, found out who you could trust, and if you found a good one, you kept those contacts polished. That was all. Never could remember how they'd taken up with him. Well before Ben, back when he'd been working with various hire-ons, something to do with a mixed-up drink order. He'd been far gone, and so had they. And a game of pitch the penny in quarter G with a crowd of equally soused tender jocks. Never could remember who'd finally gotten the bill. From over the line? Actually, if it's supposed... Yeah, we'll stick with that. Meg asked, regarding the strayed ship, and he said, "Won a number. Clean talking kid, real young, maybe 20, 22. Partner's dead out there. Tank blew. His partner was outside." Brute bad luck, Sal said with a shake of her braids, a little grimace. Then, "You seriously got rats on that ship?" "Ben thinks so. Thinks so enough to risk his knees. He's been working out for weeks. I figured he was going to pull this, but I did think he'd at least check in first." Meg said, "Want us to track him? We've been scuzzing along on 6, in no hurry, figuring on a friend showing up. Coulda done 3, coulda done 3. Wow, okay. Let's take that from the top. I'm sorry. Uh, and they haven't even gotten to the really weird patois yet. And that's going to make this even harder because it's very matter of fact. Okay. Meg said, "Want us to track him? We've been scuzzing along on 6, in no hurry, figuring on a friend showing up. Could have done 3 2 days ago. We can go down." He'll get back. If he doesn't, I'll call the hospital." "You two feuding?" "Ben gets a little over anxious." "Yeah, well, that's Ben. But if it worked, you could get salvage. Can you just take the ship?" Whoops. "But if you did get salvage, can you just take the ship?" "It's not going to work. Company'll find an angle. You watch." "K-Sab?" "K-Sab?" Meg said. "But if it did?" "Meg, he's been damn crazy. Ever since we found that ship. I tell you, I was afraid." He'd been too long away from a drink. He hadn't dared indulge on the return trip, and this one hit him like a hammer. He almost said, afraid of him. But that word could get back to Ben, and he didn't want that. He said, instead, "Ben works real hard, but sometimes he gets to looking most at where he's going, not what he's doing." Meg reached out and laid a hand on his arm. "Yeah, well, share. You want us to talk to him?" "No, no, it's between him and me. Let him get this bug out of his works. He's gonna find nothing but a string of bills into that ship's account." It's probably in hock for its last fuel bill. If we get expenses, I'll be happy.
Can't blame him for trying, Sal said. Hell, I'd brute kill for a chance like that.
You never knew on some things whether Sal was kidding. Look, Meg said, squeezing his wrist. What say you screw the medregs, cancel here, and come down to 6 with us? Meg, my old knees. Old hell. We got a nice berth there at Liberty Bell. You just stay here and collect Ben when he comes in. We'll party tonight. Get the spooks out. We knew we were we whoops, we knew we were waiting for somebody.
Yeah, said Sal. Just give us a little time to clean up the room.
Clean up, for God's sake. What are we, strangers? Meg elbowed his arm, getting up. Hey, we just gotta get a few things out of it. Female vanity. He gave a shake of his head and sipped his bourbon. A few things out of the room. The things might well be male, but he charitably didn't suggest that. And it was, charitably, true Meg and Sal might do some feminine fussing up in the place, and it was no real surprise that Meg and Sal might bounce a casual acquaintance or two in favor of him and Ben. They were simpatico, for some reason God only knew. They were also on Trinidad's lease list, though they were just in themselves, and in no position to take a ship out for another month or three. See you below, they said, and went. Pretty woman like that could have talked him down to hell deck tonight if she'd insisted. Pretty woman like that, who lied like a company lawyer. Meg was an ex-shuttle pilot, native to Sol Station, or Mars, accused at Sol Station of political agitation, or arrested for smuggling, depending on how many Meg had had. Either one, in fact, could have gotten her deported down to the Motherwell if they'd gotten the evidence she'd evidently managed to dump. In either case, the company had, she said, invited her to leave places conveniently close to sources of luxuries. Meg had taken up with Sal when she got here. Sal herself had gotten bounced out of Institute pilot training. Sal had never said why, but it didn't matter. There were a number of things Sal would have done, and you could take your pick. Sal was smart. She'd had at least her Class 3 license, and, by his reckoning, that was what the good numbers men had. She went past the numbers to see the belt in her head. It was formal schooling and experience Sal lacked, and the way Sal had been getting it, in the school of last resort, you just hoped to live long enough. He was sure the pair skimmed, occasionally, just clipped a little off another freerunner's tag if they didn't know him personally. But not from their friends. Or if they had, he figured they'd pay it back when they had it to pay, and never tell you they stole it. That was the kind they were, even Sal, who was real loose about a lot of things, and he counted that honest. Everybody got desperate enough sometime. He'd done it himself once or twice or three, and paid it back to the guys he'd done it to, without ever telling them he'd done it. He understood that kind of morality. So he'd leased Trinidad to Meg and Sal now and again, a classier ship than they could generally get, with equipment other rigs didn't have. They were learning. They took advice. He'd leased to them this time, if they'd been ready. If they'd been ready to go. He liked them. That was reason enough. But all of a sudden there was this other ship. He'd seen that idea light up in their eyes. That if by some stroke of cosmic luck they did get a second ship, then somebody had to be leasing it, didn't they? Maybe on a primary basis? Surely he wasn't going to sell it to the company. God only God only how far their imaginations took those two. Damn, he asked himself, what was the jinx on that ship that it made Ben crazy and now it had Meg and Sal thinking about something they just weren't damn all good enough yet to ask for? While nobody gave two thoughts to the poor sod in hospital who was screwed out of everything he had, not to mention the owners and the lease crews over at R1 who might be screwed. Sometimes he thought he was too old and too far from his beginnings. Sometimes he dreamed about pine trees and sagebrush and sunsets. But he dreamed very realistically about poverty, too. Recalled what it was to scrape and save to get up to space for schooling. Then, by desperation and some fast talking, to make it out to Asteroid Exploration Incorporated, to a program that let you lease purchase. They'd been that desperate for minor pilots then, desperately looking in the startup of the current push. Most of them that had come out then were probably dead now. He knew about the ones on R2, and he was the last of that lot. The plain station labor that had gone into refinery jobs and processing, God only, maybe a lot of them were dead too. He remembered young faces. He remembered the talk about what they were going to find, how they were all going to get rich on company wages. Yeah. And now that the mapping was mostly done and the company had its drivers working real smoothly, the company didn't want the freerunners anymore. Economics, they said. Freerunners didn't fit the system the way it had grown to be, all company run, and Aztecs stacked the deck any way it liked. You couldn't complain and you couldn't get clear, because that took money you didn't have. Or if you did sell your ship back to the company, you got to Sol Station with, after passage, 50, 60K in pocket, back at your starting place, aged 50 plus, with your bones all brittle and that 60K all you had for your retirement and your medical bills. But he read his brother's letters and he knew beyond a doubt that 30 years was too long an absence for anyone. Earth had changed. Attitudes had changed. People worried about things that didn't worry him, and they didn't worry where he knew they should. Earth was at war with its colonies, shooting hell out of human beings, while Earth folk argued whether the ETs at Pell had souls, and blamed the government for the market crash when company merchant ships went on strike about the damn visas. You had the Rabs walking around in shave jobs and glitter and scrawling slogans because society was going to hell and the human race with it. You had the isolationists who wanted to shut down the far star stations and not speak to anybody but Earth and Mars and the Belt. And you had the Federationists and the Separationists and the pacifists and the neo-nationalists and the new evangelicals, all of whom thought they knew how to reform the human race. You had the euconomists and the anti-geneticists and the ones that claimed there was a youth drug from space that the governments had embargoed, but the rich could still get it. And you had various defense departments in the United Nations and United Internationals building those bloody huge warships to enforce the embargoes against the rebels in far space, while the Free Trade Party that had won the election in Pan-Asian Union wanted to get rid of all the embargoes, cancel the visas, and let people go where they wanted to go. But out there in deep space, things changed. Things changed constantly, faster than anybody could keep up with. He had not quite been born when somebody out at Cytine had discovered faster than light and rewritten the book. And hell if he understood FTL physics or its politics, but the company built its ships out of the metal he'd found. They'd armed the traders of the Great Circle before he was born, and right now they were building those new translite carriers to teach the colonies a lesson. All this had been going on near 100 years, but it was breeding at FTL rates now. They'd shot the Rab reformers at the company doors back in the 15. They'd established the visas. They'd shunted Earth Company operations out into half a hundred subsidiaries like Aztecs that only tangled the company's books beyond the capacity of any single Earth-based government to audit. And nobody was responsible for a damned thing. They'd had draft riots at Sol Station a year ago. 4 kids killed. They'd had 2 officials up for falsifying military supply records, so the rumor had been. While out here in the belt, there were construction workers and those great steel skeletons you weren't supposed to talk about, that eventually, after a handful of years, powered up and pushed themselves on towards Sol Station for finishing. All this went on. But if you looked at the vid on the wall and wondered what else might be going on you didn't know about, the company news and entertainment division was running a program on hydroponic gardening. Damn crazy life. Sometimes you sat out there in the belt with one other guy in a little ship and wondered what would happen if you both and wondered what would happen to you both if humanity did go crazy and blow itself to hell. Lately, you kept an anxious ear to the news Mama doled out daily and tried to figure out who was actually running things in the mother well, because damned if the company was going to tell you about it in so many words. Aztecs, Asteroid Explorations, was part of the Earth Company, which had the whole damned United Defense Command on its leash. The whole thing was a damned alphabet riot. Aztecs, EC, SS, UI, MEX, and FN, for starters, and everybody was sleeping in more than one bed, governmentally speaking. Which he preferred not to. Maybe the kids in the colored hair and the glow paint and the nose rings were right. Maybe humankind would blow itself up. Maybe Belters would survive out here and breed themselves a whole new human race. One that thought Shakespeare was a physicist. He got up and carted himself a drink, canceled the res for himself and Ben at the Starbo while he was at it, since he hadn't used the key that had dropped from the slot, and seriously wondered if his back was going to take it on 6, in various considerations. Bird? Well, so Ben had survived. Ben was back with excitement bubbling in his voice. He turned around as Ben stopped and caught his balance against the vending machine. Bird, we got a chance. We got a real chance. A gasp for breath. Broke my neck getting up here. Another breath. Ship's got a double registry over on Refinery 1. Paul Dekker and Corazon Salazar. She's Corey. She's the partner. And his title's completely clear. You're kidding. He's no more than a kid. Dunno what she was, but they owned the ship. They owned her clear. No liens, no debt, nothing, Bird. We got it. We got the only claim against it. We are first in line. He picked up his drink out of the dispenser and just held it in a shaking hand. You didn't think about things like that. You didn't ever start wanting something that just couldn't happen. But knowing they had bills to meet and the company paying claims so slow nowadays. God forgive, he started thinking then, if Dekker was crazy, if they really were due that ship. Your name's Dekker, they asked. Meds. He remembered them. But how he had gotten here he couldn't remember. He didn't know how long he had been here. He didn't know how long he had been out just now. He asked questions back, but he never got much help from their answers. Sometimes he thought he was on a ship like his own ship. Sometimes he thought he had been hallucinating all of it. Bird? He asked sometimes. Sometimes he was afraid Ben was going to come floating up and hit him. Sometimes he thought Bird and Ben had been something he'd dreamed in this place. Had been something he'd dreamed in this place, and he simply couldn't figure out how he'd gotten here, unless Corey had somehow gotten the ship straightened out and brought him in. He felt tranked. He thought, this is a hospital. This is base. We're home. We're safe. Where's your partner? Someone asked him. He slitted his eyes open, lifted his head so far as he had strength to do. He saw a white coat, a man writing on a slate. Where's your partner? The med asked him. Do you remember? Black. An alarm screaming. The ship jolted and spun. He struggled against the weight of his own arm to reach the controls, wondering whether the autopilot could possibly straighten them out, or if it had engaged already. He didn't know. He hit the switch. Something jolted the ship, threw him against the workstation. Mr. Dekker, do you recall what happened? Green-walled shower. The watch showed March 12.
What day is it?
He asked, but they didn't answer him. He tried to see his watch, but he couldn't move his arms.
Bert, what time is it? For God's sake, what time?
The man in white wrote on his slate and said, "What time do you think it is?"
Give me my watch. Where's my watch?
It wasn't on his wrist. It had lied to him. Or it was his only way back.
Where's my watch, damn it? I want my watch!
The man left. Others came in and shot something into his arm. After that, he could hear his heart beating heavier and heavier, and he was slipping into dark.
Bert?
He asked, thinking Ben must have something to do with this.
Bert, wake up! Bert, help me! Bert, wake up and help me!
Chapter 6. Glass touched glass in the Liberty Bell on 6. "Here's to friends," Sal said, and Bird, telling himself it was far too soon to plan on anything, had made up his mind not to tell Meg and Sal a thing. But that had gone by the side the minute they'd seen Ben's smugly cheerful face. "You got it," Meg said, before they even got their drink orders in. "We're at least we're at least tracking," Ben said. "We're gaining on it. They're going to expedite the claim." For the life of him, Bird couldn't figure out how Ben had managed to get around people in offices. But he did. So here they were, on their way to feeling no pain at all. 7.7 G be damned. It wasn't as if Meg and Sal would leave them cold tomorrow if the deal fell through. They weren't that kind. But they sure as hell enjoyed the party tonight. They enjoyed it afterward, too, piled into two adjacent rooms in the Bell. Actually, the party traveled and they had to throw this one pair of tender jocks out twice, who complained they'd been invited.
No, you weren't,
Sal Abujib said, and shut the door and slid down it, laughing. Meg was laughing too much to help her, so they hauled her up and picked her up, Sal yelling that they were going to drop her on her head. So they fell on the bed, which at low G meant a slow bouncing, all of them, while up and down went sort of alcoholically crazed for a moment. "God," Bird said, falling back on what he thought was a mattress. "I'm Z'd." Meg fell on him with a vaporous kiss, and he stopped caring which way was up. Turned out when they waked it was Ben and Sal's bunk they were in, but that was no matter. Ben and Sal had just gone off next door. But they had last night's sins to pay for. A hangover in low G, with your sinuses and your ears playing tricks, was hell's own reward.
Corey?
Dekker asked.
Corey?
But he was not in the ship. He was inside white walls, with white-coated medics, who asked him over and over, "What happened to Corey?" And he couldn't altogether remember what their truth was, or what they wanted him to say. He asked for Bird, and they asked him who that was, but someone said in his hearing that that was the man who'd brought him in. From where? He tried to remember where he had left Bird, or what had happened, but it always went back to that shower stall, the watch showing him the time. March 12. And it was his choice what would happen to that day. Whoops. And it was his choice what would happen that day. He slept again. He was more comfortable when he waked. His hands were free, and they let him sit up and gave him fruit drink. A man came and sat down by his bed with a slate and started asking him questions. How old are you? Have you any relatives? All rapid fire. It was the sort of thing they asked if you'd had an accident, something about next of kin. It scared him. The shower in this room wasn't the shower he remembered. He could see the white walls through the door. He jumped ahead. Corey wasn't with him, and he was in a hospital having to go through these questions like some actor on a vid. It couldn't be real. God, he didn't want his mother to hear he was lying in a hospital somewhere she couldn't help. He'd screwed up enough. He just said he was from Sol Station and shut up. What was your relationship with Corazon Salazar? They asked him then, cold and impersonal. He said, going through the ritual, She's my partner. But if he went on answering, they'd write it down as true, and he'd be here. He couldn't go back to the shower. He'd be out of the loop, and he'd have no chance to fix it. Corey would be dead then. No way back. The man asked, Did you have relations with her? That made him mad. That's not your business. The man asked, Did you ever quarrel? No. The man made a mark on his slate. What did you invest in that ship? He didn't understand that question. He shook his head. Did you put any money into it? He shook his head again. That wasn't the way it worked. Corey was the money. Corey was the brains, too, but he didn't admit that to a stranger. Corey was the one who had no question what she wanted. But the man didn't ask that. The man said, What happened out there? He couldn't go back to the shower now. No green walls. White, he thought. What should I tell them? He thought, white. He thought, what should I tell them? And the man said, Does that upset you? You said Miss Salazar was working outside the ship. Why? He said, not sure what might have changed, We were working a tag. Did Miss Salazar regularly do the outside work? I'm the pilot. Two answers right. He felt surer now. I see. So she hired you, and gave you half interest in her ship. For nothing. He nodded. Where did you meet? We wrote letters back and forth. We'd been writing a long time, since we were kids. Another note on the slate. Then it was more than a business relationship. Friends. You didn't have a falling out, did you? He looked at his watch, but it wasn't there. They'd taken it. The man said, Did you quarrel? We never quarreled. She always did what you wanted? Or didn't she, this time? He didn't understand. He shook his head. He thought about the shower, but it wasn't vivid this time. Even the green seemed faded. The man asked, Why did you cross the line? To cover what you'd done? He didn't understand what they were getting at. He shook his head again, looked furtively at his wrist, remembered he mustn't do that. It upset people. Like Ben. It upset Ben a lot. Tell me the truth, the man said. What were you doing out there? We had a tag, he said. We were working it. He lost the room of a sudden. It was dark, and there were the boards lighting and blinking. He tried to find the safe white wall again. Did you leave her there? The man said. He couldn't remember what he'd just said. He could only see the boards, and someone was holding him down. He got an arm free. People were yelling. There were flashes of the white room. There were faces over him, and they were all holding him. He yelled, Let me go! And they felt a sharp explosion against his shoulder, but they kept holding him, telling him to calm down. He said, out of breath, I'll be calm. I'll be calm. I don't want any more sedatives. Because when they drugged him, he had no idea where he was, or how long he was out, or where he went in that dark. He opened his eyes again with a terrible leaden feeling, as if he weighed too much and he couldn't wake up. But he knew where he was. He was in the hospital. Two very strong men were holding him down and asking him how he felt now. He was out of the dark. He said, when he had gotten a whole breath, "I'm fine. I'm fine. Just don't give me any more shots, all right?"
Will you talk to us? Will you behave?
"Yes," he said. The man in white leaned over him, took hold of his wrist, and asked him, "Are you still worried about your watch?" His heart gave a little thump, making him dizzy. But he knew it was a test. He wasn't supposed to ask the time. They beat him when he did that, or gave him shots. He shook his head, wanting to stay awake now. The doctor said, "We're going to take some readings while we talk. Is that all right?" Another test. He made up his mind then. It didn't matter what the truth was. If he didn't say exactly the right thing, they'd give him shots. He'd been in trouble in his life, but this was serious. This was a hospital, and they thought he was crazy. The doctor asked him, "Are you still worried about your watch?" Black. The siren going. He heard something beeping wildly. A timer was going off, and he didn't remember setting it. He could see the doctor frowning at him. He tried to track on the doctor. He knew how important it was. And when he did that, the beeping slowed down.
That's better, the doctor said. Are you all right? Do you want to tell me what just happened?
He got a breath. He said, calmly, trying to pay no attention to the beeps, "Corey was outside. We were working this tag."
On which side of the line?
"On this side." Stupid question. The beeps went crazy a moment, when his heart did. He got it calm again. "We were working this tag. A big claim. Kilometer wide. Big."
Are you sure, Mr. Dekker?
It was that big. And we were out there. We'd shot our tag, but it wasn't a good take. Corey said. The beep sped up again, and he slowed it down, staring at the wall, remembering Corey saying, "We're not letting those sons of bitches." We had to fix it, and she was going to go in.
You couldn't handle a rock that size.
It was stable, not that bad. Again the beep. He said, before it could get away from him, "But this damn driver, he wasn't on the charts. He wasn't slowing down. I said, I said, 'Corey, get in here. Corey, he's still not answering me. Corey, get inside.'"
Get the trank, the doctor said.
The beep became a steady scream, like the collision alert. Lights were flashing. I kept saying, 'You son of a bitch, my partner's out there. My partner's outside. I can't pull off.'" They hit him with the trank. Two of them were holding him, but he kept screaming, "I can't pull off, you son of a bitch!"
It's not working,
somebody said. The doctor pushed his eyelid up, leaning close, said, looking elsewhere, "Get the chief," while breath came short and the monitor was beeping at a steady panic. "They didn't list it," he said. "It wasn't broadcasting." The doctor said, "Make up another dose, 50 cc's." "It wasn't on the damn charts."
Easy, the doctor said. We understand you. Cut that racket.
The beeper stopped. He took an easier breath.
Good. Good.
Another dark space then. Somebody had had an accident. An R1 ship turned up in R2 zone. Probable driver accident. which should be BM's job, but it was in William Payne's day file, straight from Creighton's office in General Administration. The memo said, "Handle this. We need minimal publicity." Payne paged through the file. A freerunner pilot in hospital, making wild charges about a driver captain violating regulations. God. The Shepherd Association was hard-nosing it in contract talks, the company trying to avert a strike. Payne shook his head. Not quite his job, but it was very clearly an information control situation, and that was his department, as executive director of public information. One could even, if one were paranoid, suspect a setup by the independents. But it seemed the pilot's physical condition was no fake, and a miner was dead. Bad timing. Damned bad timing for this to come in. The question was how far the rumors had already gotten. Freerunners had done the rescue. That was one problem. News and Entertainment could run another safety news item, give the odds against a high V rock, remind everyone it was a remote possibility. Or maybe best not to raise the question. The Shepherd Association wanted an issue. It was begging for a forum. Meanwhile, the police were going over the wreck, poking about. That was a department public information couldn't entirely handle. Best keep them away from the issues of the case. From the issues in the case, I'm sorry. A release from the pilot was the all-around best fix. Evidently, BM had a crack team going over that ship. That was good. If there was a mechanical fault, settle the problem there. No problem. Get a statement from the pilot, fix culpability if there was any. Not with a company captain, damned sure, and not in a lawsuit that could bring the Shepherd Association in as friends of the court. That certainly wasn't what Creighton meant. Wah. Let's take this paragraph from the top. I'm sorry. Getting tongue-tied. Not with a company captain, damned sure, and not in a lawsuit that could bring the Shepherd Association in as friends of the court. That certainly wasn't what Creighton meant by a settlement. A hand touched Dekker's face. It gave him the willies. He couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't even open his eyes yet. "Mr. Dekker, would you answer a question for me? There's something I don't understand." He got a breath. 2 breaths. Did get his eyes open, marginally. "What? Why the watch?" "Kept the time." "Mr. Dekker." Clearer and clearer. It was the doctor again. He made a try at sitting up, inched higher on the pillows. "How are we feeling, Mr. Dekker?" "Like shit." "You were talking about the watch." "Beep." "Explain to me about the watch, Mr. Dekker. Why does it upset you?" He wished he knew the answers to that one. The doctor stood there a long time. Finally, he thought, maybe this one's going to listen. He said tentatively, "We had some stuff linked to the main board. Way out was old. The arm didn't work off the main board. It was supposed to be a 3-man, you know, the way some of the ships used to be." "Go on, Mr. Dekker. The watch." "You couldn't work the arm and see the log chrono. Real easy to lose track of time when you're working, and we didn't trust her suit indicators. So we used my watch." His voice shook. He was scared the doctor was going to interrupt him and order him sedated if he lost it. And he wasn't sure if he was making sense to the man. "It only timed an hour, you know. The alarm was a bitch to set. So we'd set it to January 1. What day is it?" "July 15th, Mr. Dekker."
He despised crying. He didn't. He wouldn't.
The doctor was getting impatient. He took deep breaths to help him.
"Don't give me any shots. I need to figure. How far is it?"
Don't distress yourself, Mr. Dekker.
January has 31 days. February is 28. March, 12. 71. Out there in space. 71 days. She'd have been out of air in 4 hours. Oh, God.
Mr. Dekker.
March is 30 days. Or 31?
31.
12 from 31 is 19. 19 days in March. April is 30 days, half September, April, June, and November.
The doctor patted his shoulder. One of the orderlies came back.
No! He yelled. I've almost got it, damn it!
They shot him with it anyway. Be still, they said. Be still. Don't try to talk now.
49. They found me on the 21st. 49 and 21. Do you count the 12th twice? I'm losing it. Start again. Or can I trust my memory?
It was still six deck and still a waiting game. Every day Ben went down and checked the lists. Every day it turned up nothing but pending. Trinidad herself was still hung up in the investigation. There was no way they could lease her, no matter that there were a dozen teams applying. There was no way they could even start her charge up, and every day she sat at dock she was costing money instead of earning it. Bird haunted the supply shops, pricing the few small parts she needed, but they couldn't even get access to her, the way Bird put it, to fix the damn clothes dryer. You can't hurry the police, Ben said, trying to put a reasonable face on things. It can't be much longer. And Sal, between sit-ups, they were working out in the gym.
I thought you could fix anything.
Not in my range of contacts, he said, Frustrated himself. Whoops. Nudging security was asking for more investigation. Hell, Bird said, mopping his face, leaning on the frame of a weight machine. I sincerely hope they just get something decided. My heart can't stand much more of this prosperity. Meg didn't say anything, but easy, Bird. Payne said, No, damn it, just don't answer. Tell Salvatore. No, don't tell Salvatore. I'll talk to him. Hell of a day. A shepherd crew and a tender crew mixed into a bar, and a bystander was in hospital. And this. Some clerk in R1 had return sent the Salazar kid's mail as deceased, returned to sender, and the sender in question, Salazar's mother, had hit the phone asking for information on her daughter. The operator in ASCOM, knowing nothing about it, had sent the call to personnel. The confused clerk that took it in R1 personnel there couldn't find Salazar's file and insisted to the bereaved mother that there was no such person, while her supervisor had tried to stall for a policy clarification out of R1's administrative levels, then realized she was out of her depth and tried to send it through to a higher level, after which it had bounced confusedly from department to department until a secretary in legal affairs put the call on hold and the woman hung up. Salazar's mother was on the Mars Corp board, for God's sake. Nobody had told him. Nobody had told Townie. Nobody had flagged the dead miner as a problem. Alice Salazar's next phone call had hit the president's desk. Not Townie's in Aztecs. Hansford in the Earth Company's Sol Station headquarters. Hansford had called Townie. Townie had had to release the file, and Hansford's office had released the details to Mars Corp.
Alice Salazar had found out Dekker had survived, and immediately claimed it was no accident. He was a scoundrel who'd seduced her daughter, kidnapped her to the belt, and killed her for her money. Which turned out to have been a fair amount, before expenses. There was a binding surviving partner clause. But Alice Salazar was an angry woman, one damned angry woman. And lawyers were talking to lawyers at very expensive phone rates. "Mr. Creighton is on the line," Payne's secretary said. God.
Mr. Creighton, sir. Creighton said, "Have you got the letter?" "Yes, I have it up now. One went to security."
Oh my God.
"I'm sorry, sir. I certainly didn't—" "Not from your office. From Miss Salazar. She wants that boy's head. Do you understand the implications? We need this mess cleared up. We don't want him in court. I want you to patch this up. Get the facts straight. We've got to have an answer for this one."
Still no police clearance. And on a certain afternoon in the Bell, when Ben was in the bar doing some technical reading, Meg slipped into the chair across the table, leaned both arms on the table, and said, "Benji, Cher, let's go do talk." Yeah, this is where the patois kicks in and things get really tricky. He'd thought at first Meg was just bored, Bird being out of sorts for the last couple of days, and he wasn't totally surprised, back in her room, to end up in bed in mid-shift. Not the first time for him and Meg, but it was all the same unusual, even if he was entirely sure, and he was, that Bird wouldn't take exception. The side shaving was a turn on. The mop on top and down the back was several shades brighter than elsewhere, but it was beyond a doubt Meg's right color. And she had some kind of creature tattooed around one leg. Snake, Meg had told him once, early on in their acquaintance. Bert had told him what kind it was, and said if it bit you, you were dead in 3 minutes. He thought that might well fit Meg, if you got on her bad side. But he wasn't on her bad side. He had it figured by then that Meg had ulterior motives, though Meg wasn't the sort to hold a man off while his brains scrambled. He swore he couldn't do anything until she'd told him what was going on, but she proved that wrong. She had him truly gone before she started asking him about the ship, about Dekker, about the way Bird was stewing and fretting. "Bird's severely upset," Meg said. "You think there's a chance on that ship? Because if there isn't, you got to talk to him." "Dekker's brain's gone. No question. Yeah, there's a solid chance on that ship. There's a good chance." "Bert says if you get anything, it'll have to be in court. Bert's saying you won't win, that it's all just a waste. But he doesn't act it. Is there anything the company can turn up? I mean, you didn't seriously transgress any regs out there." So that was what was bothering Meg. Meg and Sal had to be looking for a lease for their next run, if that ship wasn't going to come through, or if they were only going to sell it to the company. Meg and Sal hadn't been betting elsewhere. That was what he suddenly figured, and they were down to decisions. "There isn't going to be any court, huh? I promise you. You know what Bird's problem is? He's scared he's going to make money. Every time you get talking about it, he just looks off the other way. If I hadn't filed on that ship, you think he'd ever have done it? Hell no. He'd have waited till he got his legs. Then he'd have said, well, it's too late. There'd be other creditors." "You tell me what goes through his head, Meg. I swear I don't know." "Dirt cider." "So?" One of Meg's stories had her born on Earth, too. But that didn't seem to be the version Meg was using today. "Are they all like that? Is it something in the water?" "Bert grew up poor." "So I grew up an orphan. So what's that got to do with anything?" It's habit with him when he gets enough. That's all. That's all he wants from life. He doesn't want to be rich. He just wants enough. I'm going to be changing Meg's voice, and I'm sorry. It didn't make any sense. Not at least the why of it. He held the thought a moment, turned it over, looked at its underside, and decided he wasn't going to understand. Well, it's not enough for me. Damn well not enough for me. Meg sighed. You haven't ever seen enough to know what enough is. Damn short rations, he said. That's what birds enough comes to. And it doesn't keep you fed when your legs and your back give out. It doesn't give you insurance. Insurance, Meg chuckled. God, jeune fille. That's a necessity, damn it. Ask me where I'd have been if my mama hadn't had it. Yeah, well, she was a company pilot, wasn't she? Tech. He rolled over. He didn't like to talk about things that were done with or whoops. He didn't like to talk about things that were done with or people that didn't come back. They didn't matter. But the example did. You don't get any whoops. You don't get any damn where half-ass protected. Insurance, my company schooling, birds knowing who to lease to. Like us? Oh, then here was the approach. Meg was looking at him, chin on hands, putting it to him dead on, with no bird for a backup. He didn't want to alienate Meg and Sal, especially Sal. They weren't the best miners in the belt, but they had other benefits, not all of them in bed. And he kept asking himself if he was using good sense, but the answer kept coming up that there might be miners better at their job, but if you wanted a couple of us of stick to a deal, canny partners, present company and Sal weren't damn bad. Some of Bird's friends now had his affliction, and they were going broke or had gone. Meg said, You suppose you could put in a word with Bird? Explain how we'd be reasonable? We'd work shares. Not every day somebody as tough and canny as Meg needed something from him, seriously needed something. He toted it up, what the debts might be, what the collection might be. If one looked to have a long career leasing ships, one needed a couple of reliable partners who knew the numbers. And Sal in particular had possibilities. If Sal could get a grip on her temper and shake out that who gives a damn attitude, Sal also had useful contacts. While Meg, he said, he hoped after not too long a pause, I could talk to him. What are friends for? Wake up. Someone shook at Dekker's shoulder. Come on, Dekker. Come on. Come out of it. He didn't want to come back this time. It was more white coats. He could see that with his eyes half shut. But there was dark green, too, and the gleam of silver. That didn't match. A light slap at his face. Come on, Dekker. That's fine. Do you want an orange juice? It never was. It was a cousin of that damned citrusol. But his mouth was dry, and he sipped it when they put a straw between his lips and elevated his bed. G felt heavier here. He thought, this isn't the same place. We're deeper in. How are you feeling? His doctor asked him. But he was looking suddenly at the company police, realizing what that uniform was. Paul Dekker, the head cop said, we want to ask you a few questions. He heard that beep again. That was him. That was the cops listening to his heartbeat, and it was scared and rapid. Have you found her? He asked. Cops always came with bad news. He didn't want to hear what they might have to say to him. But one of them sat down on the side of his bed. That man said, What did you do with the body? Whose body? For a moment he honestly didn't know what they were talking about, and the monitor stayed relatively quiet. Then his pulse picked up. Whose body?
Your partner's.
The beeps became hysterical. He hauled the rate back down again, saying calmly, I couldn't find her. They hit us. I couldn't find her afterward.
Mr. Dekker, don't play us for fools.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Dekker, don't play us for fools. We'll level with you. Don't you think it's time you leveled with us?
This ship ran us down.
And it wasn't on the charts. Come now, Mr. Dekker, you know and I know you had a motive. College girl comes out here with her whole life savings, and here you are. Not a steady job in your life, no school, and not a cent to your name. How'd you get here? How'd you get passage?
Corey and I were friends from way back.
So she puts up the equity, and she just insists the ship go down as joint ownership with death provision in there.
No,
Or was that your idea?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You signed it. We've got your signature right at the bottom.
I didn't read it. Corey said sign. I just signed it.
The officer had reached for a slate the other cop had. He pressed buttons. We have here a description from your port of origin, from one Natalie R. Fry, to the effect that you and Miss Salazar quarreled over finances the week you left.
Hell, if we did.
Quote, Corey was mad about a bill for a jacket or something.
I bought a jacket. She thought I paid too much. Corey'd wear a thing till it fell apart.
So you quarreled over money.
Over a jacket. A damn $38 jacket. We fought, all right. We fought. Doesn't everybody?
Ms. Fry continues. Corey had been sleeping around. Deck didn't like that.
Screw Natalie. She wasn't a friend of ours. Corey wouldn't spit on her.
Did Miss Salazar sleep around?
She slept where she wanted to. So did I. What the hell?
Well, that wouldn't matter to anyone, Mr. Dekker, except that she never got back.
The beeps accelerated, not from shock. A fool could see where this was going. He was shaking. He was so mad. And if he went for that bastard's throat, they'd trank him and write that down, too. Corey's lost out there, he said doggedly. A ship ran us down.
Mr. Dekker, there was no other ship in that sector.
That's a lie. That's a damn lie. He reached frantically for things they couldn't deny. Bird knew it was there. Ben knew. We talked about it. It was a driver, was what it was. It wasn't on my charts. The officer said, dead calm.
Bird and Ben?
The guys that picked me up. He was scared they were going to tell him that never happened either. But someone had brought him in. I called that son of a bitch. I told it we were there. I told it my partner was outside.
Are you sure the rock didn't block the signal?
No. Yes, I'm sure. I had it on radar. Why in hell didn't it see me?
We don't know, Mr. Dekker. We're just asking. So you did see it coming. And did you advise your partner?
They made him crazy, changing the rules on him. One moment they accused him, then they believed him. Sometimes he seemed to lose things.
Didn't you say you'd hit a rock? Wasn't that your story at one point?
He was lost and sick, and the drugs still had him hazed. The beeps increased in tempo. He wasn't sure whether it was his heart or something on calm.
So where did you manufacture this ship, Mr. Dekker?
It was out there. It was out there.
Of course it was out there, the officer said. You had it on your charts. Your log showed that. How could we doubt that?
He was totally confused. He put his hands over his ears. He tried to see if the alarm going was his heart or something in his head. Call the driver, for God's sake. See if they picked Corey up.
Didn't you call? The cop asked.
Yes, damn it, I called. I called and it didn't answer. Maybe my antenna got hit. I don't know. I called for help. Did anybody hear it?
A ship heard you. A ship picked you up.
Different.
He was tired. He didn't want to explain comm systems and emergency locators to company cops.
Just call the driver out there.
If there is a driver out there, the cop said, we'll ask. But if they had picked up your partner, wouldn't they have notified their base? Don't you think they'd have called that in? He thought about that answer. He thought about the way that ship had ignored warnings. He thought about it not answering his hails. He thought, it's not hours, is it? It's months. It's been months out there. The alarm sounded again. He wanted it calm because when he didn't do that within a certain time, they sedated him, and he was trying to be sane for the police.
I don't know they heard me. Just call them.
We're going to be calling a lot of people, Mr. Dekker. The cop got up from his bed. We're going to be asking around. They walked to the door. The doctor went with them. He lay there just trying to keep the monitor steady and quiet, on the edge of hysteria, but a good deal saner than he wanted to be right now. He remembered Bird. He remembered Ben. He was relatively sure he had come here on their ship. But sometimes he even feared Corey might not have existed, that he had always been in this place, that he was irrevocably crazy. And that is the end of Chapter 6 of Heavy Time by C.J. Cherryh. And that is what we will call it at for today. We will continue next week and next year going further. I apologize that I'm kind of mangling some of the pacing, but part of it is the way it's written. Uh, Miss Cherryh writes in a certain way, or at least did back then. I've been rereading one of her more recent books from like 2009, and it's still there. It's a little different because, your style changes over the course of 30 years. Or 20 years in this case, I think. That was like 2009, 2011, and this is from like 91, I want to say. So your style changes over time because we change, we're iterative. Um, but her early stuff has this kind of, and particularly this, and particularly certain parts of this book, are kind of manic, I guess. A little manic might be the way I'd describe it. There is, in fact, a paragraph in, I think it's chapter, is it right at the end of chapter 5? And it's like, there are no periods in this thing. Like it's one long sentence. How long is it? Let me see if I can find it again. Absolutely monstrous, and I don't know how I got through it. I almost went insane reading it. Where are you? No, it's not it. So lots of long run-on sentences with like 50 kinds of punctuation to differentiate that this is a different subchunk of said paragraph. And it's brutal. It is, yeah, I think it's this one on page 85. No, nope, nope, that has periods. This one. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. You had the Rabs walking around in shave jobs and glitter and scrawling slogans. So it's one, two. Let me see if I can find the first period and how many lines you go without a period, a sentence break, an actual sentence end. Starting right there. Where's the first period? And the worst part is, this is like the most informative paragraph of the state of play, so to speak, in the universe that she's created. It's like it's huge how important this is, and I think I might have mangled it because there's a period. Okay, there's a period. There's one. Let me see if I can find another. Okay, it's right down there. That's easily 10 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 lines. 20 lines with not a single period to be seen. This is a long paragraph. In fact, I'm going to reread it now because it's just like this tells so much. And this is like a thing I keep wanting to rant about how, or ramble about because of how brilliant her world building must be. Because you can tell by the way she inserts information. This is like the most heavy handed, but it's like there's a lot of information that's conveyed that isn't entirely obvious until you've read some of the other books and you're like, oh shit, that's what that means. That's a reference to this thing. Um, and it establishes like a lot of background, like that there's faster than light travel now, that we have colonies all over, a big chunk, a chunk of the galaxy, space colonies. Most of them in orbit. There is, at this point in time, there is a living colony on Cytine itself, I think, unless there will be at any rate. Um, but that's getting into a whole can of worms that I'm not going to go into here. Let me reread this. Okay. You had the Rabs walking around in shave jobs and glitter and scrawling slogans because society was going to hell and the human race with it. Semicolon. You had the isolationists who wanted to shut down the far star stations and not speak to any but Earth and the Mars and the Belt. Semicolon. And you had the Federationists, and the Separationists, and the pacifists, and the neo nationalists, and the new evangelicals, all of whom thought that they knew how to reform the human race. Semicolon. You had the economists and the anti geneticists, and the ones that claimed there was a youth drug from space that the governments had embargoed, comma, but the rich could still get it. Semicolon. And you had various defense departments in the United Nations and United Internationals building those bloody huge warships to enforce the embargoes against the rebels in far space, which is also 4 lines without any punctuation, comma, while the Free Trade Party, with FTP capitalized, that had won the election in the Pan-Asian Union wanted to get rid of all the embargoes, comma, cancel the visas and let people go where they wanted to go, hyphen, but out there in deep space, things changed, comma. Things changed constantly, comma. Faster than anybody could keep up with. Period. So that whole thing, from you had the Rabs all the way down to could keep up with, is one giant sentence, subdivided by semicolons. So let's do a quick breakdown on all that. Because this is right before the drop on Cytine. So Cytine is where they discovered uh, Rejuve. There is actually this is so there's put cased couched as rumor is actual things that are relevant to the formation of the world in general, and part of this is that. Um, so so Cytine, there aren't very many planets that have functioning biospheres in this Merchanter universe. Um, which is I think nominally what the series is called, is the Merchanter universe, or is it Alliance Space? It's one of those. It's I think she's changed the name of the verse, but it's like that. Merchanter or Alliance, Alliance Merchanter, Union is the other faction, and there's a. This book is interesting because it tells the state of affairs on Earth, right around when things are gearing up for a big event in the book Down Below Station. Matters are coming to a head. This is describing that humanity has basically started doing a diaspora across the stars, and people are getting separated out from Mother Earth. But Earth isn't really realizing, and it's even brought up right in this series of passages about how people on Earth don't really seem to care about the same things that other people do, um, like belters. They don't. It's like people aren't caring about the same values that they used to care about. They're caring about different things. They have different priorities. They're asking questions about, hydroponics. instead of how, what's going on here or there or wherever. So it's Earth is insular, and that's part of the problem, and part of what this book deals with, and particularly its direct sequel, Hellburner, is kind of build up towards a very dramatic event that happens in yet another book called Down Below Station, and that's like the events that occur towards the end of that book are like the cornerstone, the lodestone, the pivotal watershed moment by which the entire rest of all the books tied to this universe hinge on. Like it is the defining moment, at least in my opinion. It's the defining moment that like everything spreads out from there. Heavy Time and Hellburner are prequels kind of to that. Um, there isn't strictly a linear narrative. There is a chronological period in which the books take place, and there's only like four books that I know of in the series that are like direct sequels in any way, uh, or need to be read together. Like you can't really read Hellburner without having read Heavy Time first because it's a direct sequel. You can't read the book Regenesis until you've read the book Cytine because Regenesis is a direct sequel. It happens like I don't know within an hour of the ending of Cytine, which is a brilliant book, and I would love to read that aloud, but it's also like I don't know, 500 pages, 600 pages long. It'd take me forever to get through that. Like that'd be an entire year, and then I'd feel very much compelled to read the sequel aloud. Because what would be the point if you didn't? I am almost certainly going to be doing Hellburner shortly after I read Heavy Time, finish reading Heavy Time aloud. And I realize right now I'm rambling and I'm just kind of gush, 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 gush. Um, but I lost my train of thought completely. So it's brilliant. And I've done a very bad job of explaining why it's brilliant. And I do want to apologize how I'm kind of mangling the pacing. I'm probably going to be changing Meg's voice because if I have to have Meg and Ben talking in the same page, I'm using some like mental reference notes for one that I'm also using for the other, and that's not really helping me here. It's making it harder. So she'll probably, I don't know, probably have an Irish accent, something a bit easier to remember. Um, I'll try anyway. That might get campy. Um, so I apologize that some voices are going to have to change, but that's the way it is. Or I might not do it. I might just be like, we're gonna go with what we're doing. Whatever. In any case, I do this every week at starting about noon Eastern Standard Time. I live stream out on Fridays, free read Fridays, where I read short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. I also have other streams throughout the week. I have Mecha Mondays, where I do something giant robot related or mecha adjacent that I do, also at noon Eastern Standard Time. Right now, we're doing a run through of Remote Control Dandy, which is a old PS1 game that got fan translated about a year and change back um, from Japan, where you play as somebody who's remote controlling a giant stompy robot. So awesome, obviously. And then on Wednesdays, I do Warframe Wednesdays because I have to do something mainstream so that normies can notice me. Is normies still a term used? Probably not. Forget I said it. The market appeal, I guess. Broad market appeal, because let's face it, giant robots are super niche. Um, Enthusiasm surrounding them is fairly niche. Um, I actually do get some viewership there, which is nice. So it shows that it's niche, but people do have an interest and they seek it out. And then Free Read Fridays is about as niche as you can possibly get because I guess not as many people read anymore as I thought they do, which is sad. But that's why I'm reading it, so you can listen while you're doing whatever. And I know these are 2 hours long, and that's kind of a blocky format to do. But they're all recorded on the YouTube. In fact, that's probably how you're listening to this, because as far as I know, nobody's tuned in right now. My analytics aren't showing anything, but I don't really pay much attention to those. I don't do this for money. I am thinking of getting a Patreon together, but like where you can request a book be done, because otherwise I'm just kind of going on my own recognizance. I've had a few requests. I've gotten to one of them. I want to get to some of the others, but honestly, shoot me your requests. Whatever it is, I'll have to read it beforehand and vet it. I did get somebody wanting me to read Ender's Game aloud. Um, I may not be getting to that anytime soon, mostly because I've got like this, and then I've got Hellburner after that, and that's going to take up months, and then I'll figure out where I am from there. So yeah, hope people dig it. If they don't, I'm sorry. I take feedback, and I realize that because it's a live format, there's a lot of dead space, and that's not great. At some point, I would like to get to editing these, but that time is not now. Editing is hard, but I would like to get around to that, at least getting timestamps set up for some of the major breaks. So I hope to do that eventually, but not for a while because I've been busy, 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 busy. But we'll see. Alrighty, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. Stay safe, stay sane, stay toasty. And don't let the doctors make you think you're crazier than you already is. Isn't that a wondrous idea? Or they might not be doctors. They might just be crazy people. You know, we're all crazy. Or something. Alrighty, folks. Talk to you later. Bye.